Welcome to our webinar series, Spotlight on Structured Literacy. My name is Lama Farhan. I serve on the IDA Georgia Board of Directors, and I'm the chair of the webinar committee. On behalf of the boards of both IDA and the Reading League Georgia, we are pleased to be offering this webinar series for the 5th year. IDA and the Reading League are committed to providing information on evidence-based practices to educators, parents, and advocates. In doing so, we hope all students will have access to structured literacy instruction. In this 5-part series, our speakers draw on the science of reading and the science of the teaching of reading. In tonight's webinar, Dr. Maryanne Wolf will discuss research on the reading brain and dyslexia and use it to argue for a broader understanding of foundational skills and comprehension that, in turn, involves an invitation to mend reading method tensions of the past. Before we begin, thank you to those who submitted questions when you registered for this webinar. As a reminder, if you have other questions, please put them in the chat box. The chat will be monitored this evening by Elizabeth Hogan, President of the Reading League Georgia. During the Q&A, our speaker will address as many of your questions as time allows. And now I'll turn it over to Jennifer Lindstrom to introduce our speaker.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Maryanne Wolf is a scholar, teacher, and global advocate for children and literacy. She directs the Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice at UCLA and the former John DiBiaggio Professor of Citizenship and Public Service at Tufts University. She has authored over 170 scientific publications: Proust and the Squid, The Story and Science of the Reading Brain, Tales of Literacy for the 21st Century, and Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital Culture. She is co-author with Martha Denckla of the RAS naming speed test and developed the RAVE-O Intervention Program for all struggling readers. Her awards include the IDA Samuel Orton Prize and the Norman Geschwin Lecture Award for contributions from neuroscience to dyslexia, the Einstein Award from the Dyslexia Foundation, and the Walter Ong Award and the Alfred Korzybski Award for her work on the effects of different mediums on the intellectual development of the species. She was elected a permanent member of the Pontifical Academy of Science. Please join me in welcoming the renowned Dr. Maryanne Wolf.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much. And thank you, Kim and Lama and all the people behind the scenes that I just talked to who are doing such wonderful work in both IDA and the Reading League. I'm just so delighted to be able to work with you. But I have to show you before I begin what I am wearing in honor of Comer Yates and Ryan Lee James and Kim Day and everybody in Georgia who's works literacy and justice for all at the Speech School and Cox Campus, and the Cox Campus has modules by us. This is such a wonderful state and city, and it is a joy that so many of my research colleagues like Laura Reinhardt are working with you in Georgia. So today's a special day for me too. Now, what I'm going to be doing in the next 45 minutes, and that's all I'm going to have, but I'm going to whiz you through it, is to give you almost an apologia for all the work that you are doing to teach our children and our youth and our adolescents and our multilingual readers, all of them, how amazing our language is, oral and written. I usually begin my talks these days with Toni Morrison, whose work is just simply extraordinary, because she understands as a writer some of the most important insights that any of us ever have about language and what she calls word work. She said word work is sublime because it is generative. It's protein. It leads to the next thought. It makes meaning that secures our difference, our human difference. We die, that may be the meaning of life. But we do language. That may be the measure of our lives. I believe this is one of the most important things that you and I, all of you, anyone who is looking at this wonderful series by IDA and Reading League, this is about almost the philosophical underpinnings of what we do. But there's always a missing piece. I'm talking no matter what about science and about story, but I never want us to forget that at the beginning of reading, what we are giving not only all the information, the background knowledge, the concepts, the language, but the feelings of joy. And E.B. White, who you know wrote Charlotte's Web, said something so important. All that I hope to say in books, all that I ever hope to say is that I love the world. You see, when we love reading, when we can give our children our own love, show them, model our own love, we are putting the seeds. We're like farmers. We are planting the seeds of love, of reading, which helps them love each other, love themselves, and love the world. So this is a really important aspect. Before I begin with the science, I want us to have that philosophical, even if you will, ethical sense of what we are doing for that next generation. Now, I'm all about expanding knowledge, and I want to expand the science of reading for some of you. For many of you, you know what I'm going to say, but many of you don't. And so what even though some of you I know have heard me give talks before about how we have to change our too narrow view of the science of reading, which, for some people, it only is phonics, no matter how important phonics is. And it's at the heart of structured literacy, to be sure, but it's not ever by itself in the reading brain. We have all these things that go into our foundational skills, and I'm going to be talking about that, and all the things that are underneath the surface of reading comprehension, which I will call deep reading. And that knowledge is really a much more complete, and there is no, I'm never going to complete the science of reading. It's an evolving science. But I will suggest to you, like Marcus Aurelius, that we need to set the record straight. It's not only about one thing. That's not what the reading brain is, and that's not enough for our teaching. So I am probably one of Robin Morris, my dear colleague, who used to be at Georgia State. Oh my gosh. Rose, Maryanne, Robin, all of us have been working so early on in the pillars of what we call science of reading now. And I'll talk about a study that Robin Morris and I do later. But what I want you to realize is that no science stops. It's constantly evolving. And in addition, it has many roots that somehow have gotten missed or too narrowed in some people's current understanding of the science. That science has these multiple pillars, or if you will, root systems. My own teachers, Norman Geschwind in neurology, neuroscience, Martha Denckla in education, our dear Harvard Reading Lab mentor, Jean Chall, psycholinguistics, both of the Chomskys, Reed Lynan in ICHG, Linnea Airy and the National Reading Panel. All these are roots. And then you have these research studies within these root systems. And I will be giving you a root system from cognitive neuroscience in which we look at the reading brain circuit as a map, if you will, a cartography of the parts we need to address and connect when we teach reading. But I've said this maybe 100 times, and it still isn't the case that everybody has heard this or understands when I say reading is not natural. It is an invention. And an invention like numeracy, literacy, requires a new circuit that didn't exist in the brain. So the human brain was never born to read. What it is an amazing entity that has a design principle that it can form new circuits by connecting its older genetically programmed parts. Like if you look at the big 5 rings here, they're language and vision and cognition and affect and motor. That all has networks within them, and reading integrates them all in a new circuit. Now, that means that young reading brain needs to form a circuit by addressing and connecting those original parts that are developing between 0 and 5. I just gave a podcast. I've given many podcasts lately, but in particular, people who are working 0 to 5 and secondary are realizing the knowledge that I'm going to be giving you is helpful both before and after the reading acquisition and early development period. So that 0 to 5 period is developing each of those major circuits: language, cognition, perception, motor, and affect. And I only wish, I know Comer Yates and Ryan and Kim in the Cox campus and the speech school, they are always looking at what happens before, and they work with hospitals even in prenatal. I just love this realization that reading does not begin in kindergarten. It begins with what we give in that 0 to 5 period that then becomes the stuff that we who teach need to connect. So I know some of you know that I'm becoming either famous or infamous for my emphasis on that lowly marsupial creature, possum. Now, I use possum as an acronym, despite what a lot of people say, oh, it's so ugly, all it does is eat garbage. No. In Latin, possum means to enable. And I want an acronym to enable you to remember these parts have to be connected and addressed in our teaching across our, if you will, our learning span. From early on to later, we are addressing all these parts. Now, phonics, the big P, is certainly something that most of you are aware in terms of its great importance. But I want to specify what that is really doing, that big P. Phonics is an approach, and its major goal is to be able, obviously, to help children learn to read and crack the code. But I want to parse it. I want to make you understand what phonics is doing is helping us understand what the role of phonemes. It helps the child understand that these sounds are what their language consists of. So with the big P is, and that's why I expand our understanding of phonics and phonemes, because it is always going to be in the presence, if we are really doing this in a connective way, to the letters. And now, I'm going to go back just one second. The orthographic letter patterns of English can be learned both as in terms of their patterns in language, how they make morphemes, which I'll come to in a few minutes, but never, and this is really a harsh lesson for some of you, you don't just teach phonemes, you teach phonemes plus letters, because we're making a connection. So phonics at its best, structured literacy at its core, is making those connections. But it's insufficient, if we're going to really address how the reading brain develops, to stop there. This is where the beginning of can we do better is starting right here. Because what I want you to do is to think about how we connect our knowledge of language, the elicitation of the children's knowledge, to the knowledge that develops about this very amazing but also complex language that is English. So I don't even like the word vocabulary very much, because it is insufficient to really get across that words exist in terms of networks, the semantic network. What are the words that are connected to it? What are the words that are similar, but in terms of phonemes? What are the words that are similar in terms of meaning? words can have multiple meanings. And I actually have a spider named Ms. Mim. I wish I could bring it to you. But she teaches that a word can have as many meanings as she has legs. What is that? It's polysemy. Now, I can't help being an English major despite being a cognitive scientist. Virginia Woolf said something beautiful. I used to always talk about track. Give me as many meanings as you can for track. And you'll see how many different meanings there are and how many different syntactic functions there are. It can be a noun, a verb, or it can even be an adjective. We need our children to be aware of this, slowly, gradually, but absolutely from the start. Now, Virginia Woolf said this down. It said this: we pin them down to one meaning, their useful meaning, the meaning which makes us catch the train. And when words are pinned down, they fold their wings and die. I love this quote because it harnesses this concept that words have multiple meanings, and part of reading is to go below the surface. And especially for our multilingual readers or our children who come from language impoverished backgrounds, they don't know that words could have multiple meanings. Some teachers have never heard of the term polysemy or polysemous. Fine, this is a linguistic term. There's no reason why you should have then. But now, with this knowledge that the science of reading is giving us in all these different areas, it's robust knowledge for you to use. Now, syntax, I study with both Noam and Carol Chomsky, so it's always ingrained in me, but the reading brain makes it even more clear, if you will, how important it is that you learn how to use words in their different functions. And that helps fluency. That helps move from the word as an isolated entity into connected text, into sentences and paragraphs. So this learning how words work, and even we use, at least in my RAVE-O program, we have characters for need a noun and Victor verb. However you do it, know that we need much more work on syntax to increase our children's understanding about how sentences work inside of connected text. Now, understanding the big U is both before, during, and after reading acquisition. Understanding that a word consists of sounds, and that these sounds can be represented by letters. This is a big conceptual epiphany. It's like Helen Keller. But also understanding how words work in the context of story and books. This is some of the most beautiful work in terms of cognitive development that our children need to have in our teaching. Now, morphology, okay, people used to make fun of me and Ginger Berninger and Svea Brasnitz and others, and they say, oh, what's all this emphasis on morphemes? We don't even know what they are. That was 20 years ago, and now they're everywhere. And Pat Bowers' son, is making a lot of people understand how important morphemes are. But for me, morphemes are part of the whole. They are giving us knowledge, a visual unit, fast. It increases fluency to know these morphemes. Knowing only 4 or 5 morphemes in first and second grade will help them with dozens and hundreds of words. And that little orthographic unit, that's a visual one, speeds them up because they can see it and they know that a 7-letter word is actually only 4 that they have to know. They have got the other 3. But very importantly for real understanding of the role of morphology is its semantic and syntactic markers. It really gives so much information about meaning. Now, you put all this together and you get an expanded understanding of foundational skills and how they work together and contribute to fluency. Fluency is not simply how fast you decode. Fluency is how all of these contributing processes increase the ability to see a word, decode a word, understand a word, and retrieve it later, whether in oral or written language. It's a really important aspect. Fluency is based on all of these. Sometimes I give whole seminars on fluency, but I want you to know that this expands our understanding of foundational skills, and it expands our understanding of all that's important that to work on with fluency, because fluency is our bridge to comprehension. Now, for me, I'm not going to go through the first 5 little brains here, but I want you to know that our brain is putting all that together in milliseconds. And that's our job, is to get them to be really connected to each other in terms of an automatic circuit. Now, that circuit feeds, it doesn't live by itself. Words don't live by themselves. Words live in the context of connected language, connected text. And so when I look at the word reading comprehension, I say, I hope they understand that it's not just about meaning. It is about multiple aspects of thinking and feeling. So when I say we can do better, I know you've had some wonderful talks on reading comprehension. So this is coming at it from a slightly different perspective. You can read about it. I'm going to give Kim I'm going to give her a couple papers that can go into more detail on this. But I really want you to know that it includes these multiple processes, beginning with background knowledge. We know how important Wexler has made some wonderful inroads for people and understanding that what we're doing is from the start. And I want you to think about these processes almost like a wheel with spokes, because they're coming back and forth, feed forward, feedback. So they're feeding each other. And background knowledge, we're literally finding, what do you know? And we make an analogy. Does this support? Does it refute? What does it do? So there's this dance, frontal lobe dance, really, with this background knowledge. One of the most important things I'm going to say to you is that reading is also about taking on the perspective of others. It hurts my soul to think that so many of our children are not reading books that give them this beautiful experience of passing over into the thoughts and feelings of others whom they would never meet, they'd never know, or cultures, or historical times. Reading is about not just thinking, but about feeling and empathy, perspective taking. In fact, I made the new E of RAVE-O is empathy. I see it as that important an aspect of the reading act. It is our ability to take on the thoughts and feelings of others. And if we have a civilization, Jane Smiley said this once, the great novelist Jane Smiley, she said, there are several lines here. It won't be sidelined. No, what she said, it's not going to die, but it could be sidelined. And if books are sidelined, if novels are sidelined, we will have leaders who have never read books or had the experience of understanding others. We must not let this happen. And all the work that you're seeing survey after survey about how people are not reading books, how our high school students are not reading books, how our college students are not reading books, this is imperative, because this is the building block of empathy and critical thinking. Critical thinking may be one of the most threatened aspects in our culture because it takes time, attention, and effort to do. Now, this is milliseconds, but it's time that the brain has to attend and allocate. And what it does, it gives us a chance to integrate all those processes: analogy, inference, affect, perception of beauty. All these things are feeding critical thinking and allows us to make a judgment, propels us to make a judgment about whether what we are reading is true information or is misinformation or is disinformation. And in a world in which we exist now, we are flooded with both mis and disinformation. And critical thinking requires us to be able to infer the motivation of the author or whomever is giving you that material. You need to be able to evaluate the truth. And that's both in a political civic sense. We need citizens who can see through and see what is true, what is right, what is good, what is just. And it begins with reading. And it ends, if you will, it never ends in my opinion, but it ends in reflection. The end of deep reading is a process that unfortunately doesn't always happen for any of us, including myself. I wrote about this in Reader Come Home. Sometimes we simply are skimming so much, we have no time to reflect or even evaluate what we're reading critically enough. Deep reading is putting it all together, and I really believe it begins at the start. We can teach our children all of this beauty about how do we think about what has been written. We can do that. It's not just the older kids, but we can't have a seminar or a series for Reading League or IDA without talking about dyslexia. How does that fit in this whole picture of possum? Well, you'll see my approach in just a minute, but before I talk about that, we're always talking about structured literacy as a term for what we're doing, but I'm giving you, if you will, the stuff beneath the structure, the parts of the structure, and how that helps our children with dyslexia is part of the story and the science of the reading brain, and it's all the wonderful people who've become literate. Now, as some of you know, my first son, you see that picture that painting back there, is an artist. He's a dyslexic artist. He is part of what I call the heterogeneity. If only he were a simple case. Of course, I'd have someone who had both phonological weaknesses and naming speed fluency issues, and. But what I want you to know, and I've said this to Charlie Haynes about the new definition, I've written a paper, it really is the case that we have subtypes. The smallest is the one that's just pure, if you will, pure phonology. David Scher and I just have a correspondence about this. He believes that the purest form of dyslexia may well be the naming speed indexed one. And some of you know that my mentor, Martha Denckla, and I did the RAN-RAS naming speed task. It's been, there's 1,000 different versions. The only thing I would say to you is make sure you have 50, because that will tax the retrieval system, which is what we want to know about it. But the reality is there's a lot of heterogeneity that can be more or less put into groups. Certainly Jason Yateman is looking at a very small, but very real weakness in the visual system. And we, with Ozar Palchik and John Gabrielli at MIT, we've done these big studies showing that you have these subtypes, but the largest is when they all are coming together, all these different weaknesses, but a particular set of weaknesses, the RAN and the phonological, and then sometimes language, sometimes orthographic, but that's the largest group. And that means that you are not going to just want to teach one way, which is only phonics, and I know this is it's really hard to hear. Phonics is fantastic and has to be the core of what we're doing, but for some of our children who have fluency or who have multiple, they need more than that. So we need that. It's like one of these necessary but not quite sufficient, unless they're just this very pure subtype and all they have are phoneme awareness issues. Then that's just perfect. And you'll know that because in your teaching, you'll be doing progress monitoring and making sure that what you're doing matches. So the heterogeneity is really about, from my standpoint, is matching what our possum deep reading approach, if you will, and that reading brain, making our intervention and instruction match the particular profiles. And the screeners that are being mandated, I'm so thrilled because that screener will give you areas of strength and weakness. And that combined with what you know about the risk factors or the strengths in the families, you have to understand we are after ever more differentiated intervention based on screeners, on progress monitoring, so that we don't give the same thing to the child who doesn't need it over and over, but rather we're watching it. So there are principles that come out of this approach. And part of my job with Robin Morris and Maureen Lovett has been to translate these principles into intervention and instruction. No matter what I say next, there are no silver bullets. I don't care what program or who says what. There are no silver bullets for every child. Rather, there is heterogeneity that we do our best to match these core reading brain areas. We always have this core, and that includes phonics, but what we're doing is seeing which of these need more work in some of our children and sometimes less work over time. So the intervention principles are that we address each of that possum and deep reading, and we are always integrating and connecting. The big word that very few programs do correctly, in my opinion, is that they isolate it. Oh, you do this then, you do this, that. You don't connect it. One of the most important things about the reading brain is that it is connecting all these parts and then connecting these possum parts to connected text. And so these three address the parts, integrate those connections, and don't you dare just isolate those morphemes or those phonemes without putting them in the context of these others. Now, I told Kim that I would make sure that I talk about a paper that I've given her, and I will give this to you, but I'm just going to flag it for myself. The principles of multi-component interventions are what will be described much more in what is a white paper from the Albert Shanker Institute. They asked me to write it for them because we have so many teachers who understand a lot about story and nothing or very little about the science. But we have our teachers who are well-versed in parts of the science of reading who aren't as well-versed in the information about stories and deep reading processes. And so that paper shows us a kind of wedding, if you will, which is what multi-component interventions are doing. They are wedding science and story. Now, I'm going to only use my own, but I'm just going to say that Maureen Lovett's Empower program that some of you know about, Young Suk Kim does work on multi-component interventions. We are after connecting the parts of possum and making that fluent decoding, also of not just fluent, but a way to make sure they understand. And Connie Jill said this better, that one of the major flaws in literacy programs is that the assumption that once you know how to decode it, the child knows what it means. That's just false assumption. And so this more connected multi-component approach makes sure we're connecting. If we're teaching the word track, we teach the different forms of phonics analysis, synthetic and analytic, but we teach the meanings and we elicit the meanings that the children know about tracks. It is always a connection among these, if you will, these process parts. So that's the explicit aspect. Every structured literacy program on this side of the earth has to be explicit, but I'm going to ask you to be explicit about connecting the parts, because we're all trying to be able to reach that ultimate goal in reading, which is deep reading comprehension. And so one of the things that we have developed in the new RAVE-O, the older RAVE-O program gave us all this incredible research along with Empower, but the new one really has incorporated for all purposes my more recent work and the recent work in the field on deep reading. And so I'm just showing you this one example. It's my favorite. His name is T-Lex, stands for Try, Think, Asaurus, Lex meaning word. And he teaches different comprehension strategies, think ahead, prediction, think back, all the normal comprehension strategies. But most important one, and this is what I want you to do. You don't have to know anything about RAVE-O, but you have to know that we are after building the child's concept, or the youth, or the adolescent's concept of themselves as thinker and reader. And so reading provides us with an on-ramp to eliciting their thinking and giving them confidence. The social emotional aspects of what we do are never more important than now, especially as the distraction oriented milieu of our culture is literally taking them away from the kind of work we want to have them use to build that reading brain circuit. Work is good. Effort is good. Now, data, you've always have data out the kazoo with our work, and I'll just say that the earlier the better for intervention, but this is the one that, well, it's going to be hard for some of you to hear, because you have been doing such fine work, but I'm saying we can take that fine work and go even better. And if you see the top two lines, these are the multi-component interventions that include phonics, absolutely include phonics. But if you look at the third line, that's if you only have phonics. And same amount of time, two different, I won't even go into the time involved in all this, but we really showed through ReadLine and NICHD that the multi-component is additive over and above what is gained, and very much is gained in phonics. Now, one of the things that, I'm just going to go back here once, that I want to say is that this Shanker paper that Kim has, I'm really concerned that people who have been only trained in balanced literacy and whole language have been unaware that the large science of reading is something they would find important for their work and give them license to add their own knowledge. So the Shanker paper is really helping us reach across the divide. We need to know that that balanced whole language teacher has so much to give, and we can learn from them as well about the beauty of story, but they can learn from us. We all have something to learn, all of us. And so I want to be sure that some of you really read that paper, and Kim will put it on the IDA. Now, I can't, in this moment, with everybody bombarding our culture with AI and digital, I just wanted to give 5 minutes to it and say we do have a dilemma on our hands. We absolutely have a dilemma on print versus screen, because the research right now shows the more digital exposure those infants have, the less likely their attention and language areas are developing, as well as those who don't have as much digital exposure. Further, it's not just in those early years, but it has effects all the way. More digital exposure early on will affect the 8-year-olds in their academic performance and brain imaging and the white matter connections. And there's wonderful people in Cincinnati, Zippy Horowitz-Krauss and John Hutton in Texas, who have been conducting all this research that shows us too much digital exposure is not an asset, but a deficit, actually, in the way those language and attention areas are developing over time. And the people who I talked to right before from IDA and Reading League wanted to be sure that you hear me talk about secondary. And everything I have to say before has implications. But the research that I want you very quickly to know about is that there have been these huge meta-analyses in which they studied over 171,000 young people, college age, high schoolers, and they just had them read the same thing in print versus digital. They're superior in print. Even the digital natives at the end of this meta-analysis, the last ones, were even more better. That's technically awful. They were even more significantly impressive when they were reading on print, even though they thought they were better in the screen, because they said, well, we have to be better on the screen because we're faster. They did not realize that skimming is not the way for deep reading to emerge. And you and I are just as bad as we won't say bad, we are just as affected. And the philosopher Walter Ong really said it years ago. He was Marshall McLuhan's student. He said, we talk about them as if they're digital tools. They're our tools. They're external aids. He said, they are interior transformations of consciousness, particularly when they affect how we process words. And so when I and you work on critical analysis and empathy, we are fighting the idea that our children aren't being changed by all this digital. We are fighting it and saying we want to make sure that reading brain circuit is able to read with critical thinking, inference, and empathy, and that will make us better citizens. You see, if we don't have the kind of passing over experience in our books, from Charlotte's Web to Harry Potter to Jane Eyre to Middlemarch, those books help our next generation and our present generation think differently about who others are. If we don't have books, if we have only summaries, we're not going to get that, because you aren't building the brain circuitry that builds these better and better networks. And so we will have citizens, all right, who aren't able to discern disinformation, especially politically, or misinformation. And I know Georgia's having all these big elections right now around the country, actually, but in Georgia, I was just listening to all the things that are going on. All I ask of your citizens is read deeply, whatever you're reading, and think carefully about how it and empathy make us more able to understand our fellow citizens and give them the right to their voice. Because when you understand others, you understand democracy is giving others voice. All of us are others. We can't neglect that in our children. Well, I've written, Reader Come Home, and I'm writing a new book, and you'll have the Schenker paper. But the whole point of all of this is that it's not anything about throwing away anything. It's about a non-binary look at what is useful in technology, especially in dyslexia, where the complementarity of some of our tasks, because we in RAVE-O we certainly are going to build or are building something that will help the dyslexic read faster in one game, but all the other material is print for that reader. The teacher, okay, everything is organized digitally, but that just shows you it's not either or, it's both. And how do we find what's best for each child? How do we use technology for its best? And never, if we are endangering the building of the networks of the reading brain from reading, especially on print, because it requires more effort. Now, at the end of the day, I know before Kim, end of the day, that's a pun on Kim Day, is going to come in here, but I want to end with just this. We can do better, and we will do better, because it's so important. And I'm so grateful to the Reading League everywhere, to IDA everywhere, for bringing these seminars to all of you and hear viewpoints that I hope expand and confirm your vocation as a teacher, a teaching profession, because the future of reading matters profoundly. As my favorite novelist, Marilynne Robinson, said, the greatest test ever made of human wisdom and decency may very well come to this generation or the next. It's here. We must teach and learn broadly and seriously. Now, here are a few little quick things for you to take a picture of. If you want more resources on instruction or intervention, you can write David or me at Needle Learning. Kim's going to be doing an IDA paper. I'll put that white paper on the resources. Here's a QR code for the instruction and resources. You can do that fast. And then last, this is something that Kim knows very well at the Speech School and Cox Campus. My colleague Sue Sears and the task force in what we call the Collaborative on Neuroscience, Diversity and Learning. This is a platform that we have in Araya, but you can also get it in Georgia at Cox Campus. But basically, there are modules on dyslexia, especially all the different aspects, multilingual learners, screeners, different age groups, and a very important one, the 6th module is on expanded foundational skills, where I go into way more detail, and I hope you get a chance to look at all that. So either of these QR codes, take a quick look, and then I will come back to my last slide again, and that will be how I want to leave you. We can and we will do better with this knowledge base. Thank you so much. Okay, Elizabeth, we did it.
You were amazing. You went under your time, but I'm glad because
okay, good.
I have a lot of good questions.
Oh, good. So
and I want to say, Dr. Wolf, thank you so much for bringing up the screen versus print that we were talking about, because I know as a parent myself of especially older kids in high school and middle school, they are really only using screens and reading snippets of books instead of whole books. And it seems like the curriculum is moving in that direction. I know my teacher friends are upset about it. They want to be doing the books. And so we need to get this out. I'm so glad that there's research on it, that we know that deep reading isn't happening in the same way on a screen.
Absolutely. We have so much research that's going on, both here and in Europe in particular. But Elizabeth, I've never had more requests from newspapers around the world. Documentaries, podcasts, newspapers. So many of our young are only doing these little, it's like Cliff Note version of a literate brain. Well, you see, the 3 things that are important for everybody to understand: that reading brain either grows and expands itself if we give time, attention, and effort. And if we just have summaries, we're giving none of that. We're giving no effort. People think, they won't read that long book. Yeah, because you haven't asked them to. They're not prepared to. We have to prepare them. And I think I told you, Elizabeth, and others in our moments together beforehand, that Princeton University is giving every new student Reader Come Home so they will understand that deep reading is essential for them, and the effort at it is building themselves. In other words, they are building their own brain rather than having it built by the outside forces that are just giving us summaries. We really have a job on our hands.
We do. And I'm so glad you're saying it and that we're putting it out there and that this is captured on this webinar, because it empowers us as parents to go to our districts. It empowers us to talk to curriculum companies. Because I'm honestly, frankly, a little worried. And I'm thinking about these incoming freshmen at Princeton and any college. And I'm wondering, have those kids ever even read a whole book, maybe since they were little? In the last 5 years.
The data are showing they aren't. Carol Yago just wrote an essay, and I'm going to give that to Kim too to put on about this topic too. And she quotes Reader Come Home because, we have got to get people to understand this is going to affect an entire generation. They're going to have a Cliff Note brain, the equivalent, and never really even experiencing the beauty of it all. You see, for me, it's not just about intelligence. Okay, I'm worried like heck about our government, having, mindless people who are just taking in, silos of familiar information. That's a civic worry. Another worry is I want them to love it. What a loss not to feel the immersion, especially in high school and college where you're full of hormones and you really do enter and pass over into, the Machiavellian villains and the heroines. And, and I mean, my God, we have all the mistakes in the world that are captured in novels. We may make a few less mistakes if we at least have good examples.
Well, I'm just glad that we've said it and it's out there. I do want to jump to a couple of other questions. We got so many questions for you, obviously. And some of them were very deep into brain science. And so I love that because you're definitely an expert there. So you mentioned the subtypes, and I know we've all thought about that with dyslexics. So kids that are missing, struggling with processing speed, the RAN, maybe it's the deep language. Is there, and I thought this was such a great question that someone sent in, is there actually brain scan? Can you tell the differences between like the different subtypes or levels, low to moderate to severe dyslexia in the brain? Can you see?
That's a beautiful question. Now, my former PhD student, whom I mentioned here, is Ola Ozernoff-Palchik. She and John Gabrielli at the MIT Brain Imaging Lab did one of the studies that are looking at subtypes according to differences in brain regions. And sure enough, you do see these differences. They did not have an index of severity, as you have a behavioral index, but you didn't have, if you will, an index in terms of, this much of the region was involved or that much. There was none of that. But there were, in fact, differences according to the more fluency, the more phonological, and the multi. Now I used to call that double deficit, but we have so much more knowledge that it's multiple areas of weakness, but almost always including both phonology and naming speed in the most severe subtype. And the research, we still need to do more research at a brain level on these subtypes differences. It's intrinsically difficult and untidy work because, these studies are, if only everyone was very neat and tidy. Oh, you're only this, you're only that. Right. It's just not that simple.
Right. Well, and in the same vein, someone else asked, when we have students that have, slow processing speed, that have retrieval difficulties,
definitely,
can we still really move the dial on their reading? And I think I know the answer there, but what would you suggest for teachers working with students maybe with the most, severe processing speeds? And
and honestly, it's a little difficult for me as a researcher to say. It was easy for me when it was only under NICHD, but now that I actually created a new program based on that program, I have to say, full disclosure, this is something that is out there. It's the best thing I've ever done for that answer. Why? Because my son had that exact issue. He had the best OG tutor in the whole world, in my opinion, Mary Briggs from Boston, but he still had these fluency issues. And so that was when, before I even thought I would ever do intervention work, I said we have to have intervention that goes after. In fact, that was my dissertation, was on the word retrieval processes and dyslexia and aphasia. How do we go after that? And that's when I started working on fluency and saw that all these possum processes go into fluency and include, now, when I talked about polysemy, so polysemy is a piece of this fluency, because not only do you have a reading retrieval problem, you have an oral retrieval problem. My kids, both of them, have dysnomia. And so when you teach the connectedness among words, that these words, we do word walls, we do word webs, we do all this stuff, teaching them the semantic network, they have alternatives for when they have a retrieval problem. It's fascinating. That's in the oral. But so we have, in the RAVE-O program, I went after that. It's for any struggling reader, but because it is in particular a less addressed area, it was aimed at fluency, retrieval, and comprehension, always connecting. And so we put it together with OG or Wilson or anything else. There's phonics within it. But for me, it wasn't, it was like retrieval and processing speed need more than just repeated reading, which is what a lot of people do. We do repeated reading too, but that just doesn't hack it. These other processes have to be worked on.
Awesome. I'm going to have to send you an email about the new RAVE-O program. I'm looking at my bookshelves. I have the one from maybe 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no.
I'm like, I need the new.
The new one is so fun. Oh my God.
Okay, good. Yay. Okay. And then just lastly, kind of in the same vein, but a little different, we know that our dyslexic students are also extremely bright and many twice exceptional and gifted.
Yes, exactly.
How can parents of that know their kids are really working hard just to kind of hit those goals, but we know their potential is much higher? How would you say that parents could go about advocating for their kids? Because often the schools are like, oh, they're doing great. Look, they're testing here and they're doing right. They're doing perfect. But we know as parents how much they're having to compensate and do.
Exactly. And, here's a real tough reality. Our kids have the same bell-shaped curve of intelligence as everybody else. But that twice exceptional ends up with if you will, a discrepancy between their, if you will, grade level performance, and the fact is that they could be doing 2 years ahead like many of their peers. And that is such a hard sell. I can't tell you, I have so many issues with schools in the past. I'm not doing that now, but having to argue that every child is different. And you need to really work on those children who need this, that, and how do you amplify? How do you supplement? How do you complement what you're doing so that they go and reach what would be seeming to the teacher unnecessary, to some teachers unnecessary? Look, we got them at grade level. We're ecstatic, and instead of, okay. So what I'm doing partly is I'm writing new modules that goes way beyond the original, and we're looking at deep reading in the later modules. There's so many things to tell you, but part of it is then to connect it to places like Bookalicious. Now, what is Bookalicious? Bookalicious is an app that basically, what we're doing is we do decodables. We write decodables. I write them all the time now with a group, and we're going after these deep reading skills, but there are non-decodables that can be read to the child, whether it's a read aloud by a parent or a teacher, or eventually with them, by them, but that will complement the decodables in terms of themes, letter patterns, etc. So just tiny example. So track, okay, I just used that today. Let's do bat. Okay, books on bats at different levels. Books that have the AT, books that, so we literally have a relationship with this Bookalicious. It could be anyone. I'm talking to all kinds of people who write books, because I want that to complement what they're doing. And what is it? Books. When people say, oh, you structured literacy people, you don't do much on books. No, that's just false. Don't you dare say that.
Oh, yes.
Don't you dare. But it's work to do this. And those parents, like, my family read to Ben till he was eighth grade, seventh, eighth grade, especially on vacations. And that's background knowledge. It's words, it's syntax that they, to this moment, my son, Ben, has a long history of reading one book a summer.
Oh, that's where I am as well.
One book a summer, so that at least he is gonna, and they're hard books. He read Brothers Karamazov because it's one of my favorites. That is of course, he's much older, right? But it was like, we don't give up on books, whether we read them. And the audiobook, okay, audiobook is great for that background knowledge and that's a really good thing, but it can be a better thing if it's accompanied by the book.
Right. Oh, I just ordered our summer reading books that I kind of ordered with a half in my head, like, will these ever get touched? But
Well,
I'm going to make them. You have inspired me.
You are going to do it. And we have to do that for everybody.
Right. Well, I'm so lucky that we did grow up in the time we did, because I'm obsessed.
Yes.
I'm never not reading a book. So I just can't even imagine. And it makes me sad, for our kids that they aren't experiencing.
Exactly. It's sad. You see, it's not just about intelligence. We want them to have the experience. It's a beautiful thing. It's like a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever friend. They are our friends.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Wolf. I know it's 8:02 and we have to get moving, but you were the perfect finale to this Spotlight on Structured Literacy series that we did. And just kind of wrapping this up and really talking about the deep reading brain. Having heard, we want to thank all of our webinar guests, Dr. Amy Ellman, the amazing Nancy Everhart, Dr. Charlie Haynes. We had so many great speakers this go round. And again, you were just the perfect icing on the cake. So thank you so much for doing
my
this.
pleasure. I always feel that there's a piece of me in Georgia.
Oh, we're glad there is. And so for everyone that has joined tonight, thank you. If you just joined tonight or you've been to all of our webinars, we're so appreciative to have you here, and we're already getting excited about planning next year's series. So stick with us. And if you or a colleague missed tonight's webinar, all the registrants will receive a link to the webinar so you can watch it and the slides from the presentation. You will have the opportunity to fill out a knowledge check after you've viewed the webinar if you need a certificate of attendance. That form will be sent probably midweek, since it is a holiday week, and registrants will have about 1 week to submit the form. So those who fill out the form will get their certificate of attendance after the deadline for submission. On behalf of the boards of IDA Georgia and the Reading League Georgia, we so appreciate you being here tonight. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Wolf.
Thank you.
Everyone has an amazing rest of your evening and summer. And we'll see you back next year. Thanks for attending.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Maryanne. Bye.
Bye, Kim.
Bye.